What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today we are reacting to Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus's latest 2023 NFL mock draft, and a 2-round mock draft at that. So excited to bring this video your way. Be sure as we're going along, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who does Sikkema have going way too high, and then who does he have falling way too low for your take? And then also let me of course know who your favorite team is, and if you'd be excited about the draft haul that Sikkema gave your favorite squad. Love to hear all your thoughts down below in the comment section. Like if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe if you are new and want more mock draft content. But we start with a trade at number 1 with the Indianapolis Colts moving up and taking Bryce Young. I mean, I think this move makes a lot of sense. We're hearing that the Bears have a very active phone line there in the front office with a lot of teams hitting them up. So, yeah, kind of the craze for that number 1 pick and the potential big trade that we've been kind of waiting for does sound like it's around the corner. And I think Indianapolis is going to be a big time because that's when all these, GMs, front offices, all kind of meet together in person. Everyone gets their eyes on these prospects, and then that's kind of when we ramp up into draft season. So I expect this to be a pretty pivotal week up ahead for news about that number 1 overall pick and a potential trade. Colts moving up to 1 to get Bryce Young, the guy who I have as the clear QB1 and a tier of his own. I think that makes a lot of sense. Allow them to kind of get this rebuild off the ground. Not really a rebuild, more of a retool, but the franchise quarterback's the piece that they're most missing. Texans take CJ Stroud. Yep, if you want to piss off a lot of mock draft fans, whoever takes Will Levis is going to be the fan base who irritate the most. And for me over the last weekend was the Houston Texans, so I'm sure a lot of Houston fans are excited to see CJ Stroud here in Sikkema's mock. Again, Indianapolis is going to be kind of fascinating to find out where the league is on Stroud versus Levis, who's QB2, who's QB3, and honestly where Anthony Richardson kind of fits into that as well. But nonetheless, I do think Stroud would be a good fit in Houston. Most accurate passer in the class by in my opinion at least, and from a lot of other people as well. Got the tall stature, got the big arm. Maybe not the strongest arm in this class. I don't think Levis has a more arm strength than Stroud, but it's not a weakness by any stretch. Enough mobility to tuck and run if it's last resort. So this is really just kind of the move because similar to Indianapolis, it's like this is the piece that this roster is missing. So let's go ahead and get this off the ground and let's see where we're moving for the next few years. So I'd love to see Houston take quarterback at 2. If they have Stroud over Levis, then that's the pick for sure. Panthers trading up to 3. I've had some mocks where they trade up with Arizona at 3. So fun to see some other people thinking the same way, but then taking Anthony Richardson. Not who I would have thought. I would have definitely thought this was Will Levis, but Anthony Richardson. So, hey, if you're a big believer in AR, this is the mock for you right here. Richardson going ahead of Levis. I mean, I don't think that Sikkema might be the only one in thinking that that's possible. Because if you're going to go projection, with the upside, like Levis, it's accounting for a bad situation around him. But multiple years as a starter, worked with a couple different offensive coordinators, former offensive coordinators at the NFL level. Like those excuses versus like Anthony Richardson, it's just like he only had 1 year as a starter. Like, which one's a harder thing to project? That comes down to the eye of the beholder. But for a lot of people, I can see where it's like, hey, well, Anthony Richardson just hasn't had enough reps. Like, this guy just needs to play more football. He'll be better. Levis, it's like, okay, well, apparently he needs a great supporting cast. You need to clean up the decision-making, all that sort of stuff. So I can see Richardson being the project of choice maybe for people. And at 3, man, Carolina, if you don't feel like you can get him at 9, then, bring fate into your own hands and go ahead and make that move up to 3. I don't think he put any draft capital. It doesn't look like it. So I don't know the exact details of that, but a move from 9 to 3 is obviously a little bit less than 9 up to 1, but I still think it'd be a hefty price to pay. But for Arizona, I think it makes sense too, because go ahead and draft the best player available there at 9, whoever that is. We'll get there once we get there, and then get more ammunition. This is a team that is multiple years away, so go ahead and load up on draft picks. That's the best way to take, the best route to take to getting back to relevancy. Then at 4, we get the Chicago Bears taking Jalen Carter. I've said this 1,000 times. I think this is who they take at 1, so why not trade down to 4 and still get the guy that you would take at 1, plus all the extra assets? Same thing we were talking about there with Arizona. Now, granted, I think Chicago is kind of in a position because of all their cap space and already having pretty decent draft capital to where they could get kind of interesting next year. But moving down to 4 gives you an extra first rounder, more than likely in 2024, just in case Justin Fields doesn't turn out to be the guy. So having that little bit of a call of an opt-out, if you will, to be able to go in a different direction if need be. I think that's huge for Chicago. So I think their ideal world, they're trading places with Indianapolis, but I think Indianapolis, Chris Ballard's a good negotiator. He's going to use that to their to Indianapolis's advantage. So be interested to hear the details once we get past the combine and what the reported packages are, who's given up what, all that sort of stuff. Seahawks take Will Anderson Jr. This would be one of the best case scenarios. When there's 3 quarterbacks to go, 1, 2, and 3, Seattle's a huge winner because they either get Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. Most Seattle fans, I think, would tell you Jalen Carter would be their preference, but it's 1A, 1B for the best non-quarterback in the class. So I don't think a lot of Seahawks fans are going to be upset by this. Get a legit double-digit sack type of year dude on that roster, in addition to Boye Mafe, who took on day 2 last year, Lieutenant Owosu, who's coming off a really strong season. So this just kind of adds one more threat into that edge group and bolsters that pass rush in Seattle, which certainly could use it to another level. Then we get the Lions at 6, Christian Gonzalez. So we've seen the Lions going, CB1 here at 6 and a handful of mocks, but this time Sikkema wants to make a Gonzalez instead of Witherspoon, who's kind of been the go-to for a lot of people. And I think Gonzalez, just as much as Witherspoon would be a great fit in that Aaron Glenn defense, I think Gonzalez, if you were to ask me today, he might be my CB1. I've said this plenty of times where him and Witherspoon kind of go back and forth, and then Joey Porter Jr. is right there at CB3, but they're all kind of separated by, a hair, each. So right now, I think I might tell you Gonzalez, but I'm also kind of hyped up for the combine. I think Gonzalez is going to tear it up in Indianapolis. So this might be a little bit of a proactive move from Sikkema, getting out in front of Gonzalez's post-combine draft hype, and he could certainly be the first cornerback off the board. I think he has the man press ability that makes Witherspoon a good fit, but also great movement skills and long arms and a fantastic frame to be a great zone corner. So I think it goes both ways. So I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he's the first cornerback off the board. And again, if you were to ask me, I think he might be my CB1 as of today. We'll see. Tomorrow I'll probably change my mind. Raiders go Will Levis. Yeah, this could totally make sense. This comes down to if you think they're going to get Aaron Rodgers. I just don't think Rodgers is going to retire. I don't think he wants to share a Hall of Fame ceremony with Tom Brady. Those little details matter a lot to Aaron Rodgers, so I don't think he's going to retire. I do think he's going to play somewhere. Comes down to the Raiders and the Jets. Both situations I think would be really, really interesting. The Jets probably a little bit more Super Bowl contender potential with someone like an Aaron Rodgers, but they don't have Devontae Adams. And as great as Garrett Wilson, and his potential, has him looking like he could be, Devontae Adams is a boy. So I don't know. It could break either way, really. But if they don't land Aaron Rodgers, then I think, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, whoever that next best quarterback available is, I think that's the pick. And in this case, they're getting the 4th quarterback off the board, but he's my QB too. So I'd love the situation if I were the Raiders. So if you miss out on Rodgers, I definitely think this is the path they're going to take. At 8, Tyree Wilson comes falling all the way down. Still going to be a guy who goes top 10 pretty much no matter what. But yeah, it's interesting. The last reaction we did was to Daniel Jeremiah, and it's like he's going 3 over Will Anderson, and now we got him falling down to 8 to Atlanta. So it definitely varies based off whoever's writing up the mock. But awesome length, and the wingspan's almost 80 inches. He's got like an inch shorter arm or wingspan rather than Giannis Antetokounmpo. So that's bananas. But also 6'6", 280. He can win with the power. But really, it comes down to long arm and off the tackles. That's where he makes his money. Love to see him be able to add another move off of that, but nonetheless, right now we're talking about a guy who played 5 years of college football. I think he's ready to make an impact right away, and given that type of arm length and his ability to win with power and his arms, makes for a really nice pairing with Arnold Ebiketie on the other side, who wins with speed and finesse and bend and things like that. So I think it gives you a really nice 1-2 tandem there on the edge for Atlanta. So I'd love to see this if Wilson were to fall all the way to 8. Then the Cardinals, so trading back from 3 to 9, they get Devon Witherspoon. I think that would be a great addition to that secondary. In a perfect world, you're still bringing back Byron Murphy, and that gives you a really nice tandem there on the outside. I'd love to see that. Plus all the additional assets you get from moving 3 down to 9. Yeah, you miss out on a blue chipper like a Jalen Carter or a Will Anderson, but you still get one of the best defensive players in this draft class and a bunch of other picks. If I was a Cardinals fan, I'd be really excited about that type of move. Then at 10, the Eagles take Paris Johnson Jr. Interesting. Haven't seen offensive tackle as high as 10 to Philadelphia, but they always prioritize depth in the trenches. I almost wonder if Peter Skoronski might be their move then, just because I know he can play guard right away. Paris Johnson Jr. certainly can too, but that year at Ohio State where he played right guard, he looked like a 6'6", 315-pounder that belongs at tackle because that's his true position. So, this could be a move that's preparing for the future, right? Like Lane Johnson can't play forever, so maybe this is in preparation, but I still think that Johnson and Mailata tandem can last for another couple of years. So we're talking about Paris Johnson Jr. potentially having to start his career at guard, which hey, getting experience, getting starting time, that's not a bad thing, but I'd rather see be a tackle. I think that's where we hit his full, potential. So if you're going to take one of these guys, maybe Skoronski, but I have Paris Johnson Jr. as the top tackle in this class, so glad to see he's OT1 off the board here. And if the Eagles made this type of selection, it would fit with their MO, and, long-term, like in a couple years' time, I bet we would look back at this pick and be like, good thing they did that because happened, Then we get to 11. The Titans take Peter Skoronski. I think this makes a lot of sense. Skoronski and Broderick Jones, for very different reasons, both feel like Mike Vrabel guys. Skoronski is just like, he doesn't have the arm length. He doesn't look like, a first-round tackle in a lot of ways. I mean, he plays like one, and he's not necessarily small, but you compare him to a Broderick Jones or a Paris Johnson Jr., guys who look like they belong in the first round, and it's like, Skoronski's kind of the odd man out there. But he just gets the job done. He's consistent. He's solid, and one of the best pass protectors in this class, despite not having great arm length. I can see Vrabel being like, yeah, that's my guy. I don't care about everything else, I just want the result. And Peter Skoronski has great results. But Broderick Jones kind of brings that, mauler, run blocking, type of specialist. And I feel like that fits with their identity. So either way, I wouldn't be upset with that pick, but they have got to find that Taylor Lewan replacement now that he's been released. Because Dennis Daly showed us last year, he certainly is not it. So trying to take a swing back here. And tackle's pretty much been the pick for me throughout the entire cycle. The occasional wide receiver at 11, but pretty much been offensive tackle the whole way through. So, yeah, not the only one I'm thinking that clearly. The Texans at 12 go Quentin Johnston. Yep, this is a fit that I would love to see. CJ Stroud, again, strong arm, even not the strongest in this class, but more than capable of pushing the ball down the field. Why not give him a guy who's 6'4", and you got Bruce Feldman talking about apparently before this season was jumping a 42-inch vertical at 6'4". Are you kidding me? And let's just say he runs somewhere in their 4.4s. 40+ inch vertical, 4.4 speed at 6'4", 215. Yeah, that's a deep threat. And plus, this dude is slippery after the catch. This guy is hard to bring down. He's a legitimate yak machine. So I think, a lot of people are making a lot about his limited route tree. And I get that. I totally understand that. I am somebody who is biased towards route running, type of wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy was my number one guy in that draft class. And, I fell in love with Garrett Wilson for a lot of the same reasons. Jameson Williams, once I got to see more of his route running ability last year, I was like, oh, this isn't just a speed demon. This guy's got a pretty much full route tree. So I like guys that can run, an expansive route tree. I like guys like that. But Quentin Johnston's this dude's a freak. He can make plays deep down the field, and he's a yak machine. If you can make an impact at 2 of the 3 layers, short, intermediate, deep, and for Johnston, it's deep in the underneath stuff where he makes his money. If you can win in 2 of those 3 areas, to me, you're worth being a first-round pick, especially when it brings the upside that Quentin Johnston brings to the table. And honestly, you talk about his athletic ability. I kind of hit on this last week with Cedric Tillman going to the Giants in my mock draft, but, I don't think that it's Quentin Johnston being unable to run more routes and expand that route tree and do more in the intermediate parts of the field in specific. I don't think he's incapable of running, that 10-yard in or anything like that. I don't think TCU asked him to do it. That was such a unique and different offense. There were plenty of weeks where they didn't ask Quentin Johnston to do anything, let alone expand that route tree. So I think he's more of a guy where he already brings a certain skill set and a lot of potential, but once he gets into the NFL level and if he gets the coaching that he needs, I think he's more than capable of expanding that route tree, doing more with his talent and his awesome athletic ability. And that's when you become a legit wide receiver 1 who wins at all 3 levels. So I think Johnson has that in his potential. But even right away, I think you're getting a slippery satellite guy and a guy who is 6'4" with a 40+ inch vertical and is going to run 4.4, if not maybe even low 4.3s, or high 4.3s rather, once we get to Indianapolis. So yeah, I'm betting on that guy. He's my wide receiver 1. Then we get to the Jets at 13. Broderick Jones, offensive tackle pretty much the whole cycle in the first round for me and the Jets. So not surprised whatsoever by this. I think this gives you the flexibility to, no matter what ends up happening with all 3 tackles, Becton, Brown, and Vance, you at least have one guy that could be your left tackle, and then maybe you're moving Elijah Vera Tucker over to right tackle, or you're playing Max Mitchell in that spot. So drafting a guy at 13 at least gives you whoever that first rounder and Max Mitchell is. That feels like an okay enough pairing. Ideally, Max Mitchell's more of a swing, and maybe you can make it work with Mekhi Becton, or you bring back a George Fant or a Dwayne Brown as a short-term starter. But nonetheless, yeah, tackle pretty much been the pick the whole way through for the Jets, and I think that is their number 1 target there in the first round. Then at 14, the Patriots, Zay Flowers. Okay, interesting. So even ahead of Jordan Addison. Yeah, but I'm here for it. I mean, Addison and Flowers kind of go back and forth for me as wide receiver 2s. This guy, I'm waiting for Zay Flowers to tear up the 3-cone at the combine. I think he is such a fluid mover, and he's smaller. He's 5'10", 170 or thereabout. But great deep route runner, awesome speed, really hard to bring down, very twitchy with the ball in his hands. And I think you can even do some stuff with him over the middle of the field. I think he gets open. That's the harder skill. So yeah, he's 5'10". I may not have the biggest frame and be this tough guy that's going to take every hit from every safety, but Tyler Lockett does plenty in the intermediate and underneath parts of the field, and he just goes down before contact comes. Who says Zay Flowers can't do the exact same thing? And plus, like I said, getting open's the harder skill. So if you get open on a 10-yard dig, cool. What you do after that, comes down to whoever has the ball in their hand. And if he wants to take a hit, cool. If he wants to go down, sweet. But getting open is what makes the play happen. So I think Zay Flowers can be a guy who makes an impact at all 3 levels, but namely, just like Quentin Johnston, yards after the catch, that underneath weapon, but also a guy who can work and get open deep down the field. He does it in a different way than Johnston. He does it with more speed and separation skills, while Johnston will just go up and moss fools. But nonetheless, the production is the production. That's all you're worried about. And New England could certainly use another burner. They could use a clear-cut 1. Inside-out versatility is key here, too, because if you keep Jacoby Myers around, I want a guy who can play on the outside. So we'll have to get through free agency and get an idea of what type of wide receiver the Patriots are needing. But if you do lose Jacoby Myers, Zay Flowers can step in and be that guy. guy as well. So I like that flexibility here. So let's move on to 15. Green Bay taking Dalton Kincaid. First tight end off the board, not named Michael Mayer. Always interesting when I see mocks like this. Yeah, Kincaid's a hot name right now, but I am just not as high on him as others, and that's totally fine. I do think he is a different tight end than someone like a Luke Musgrave or Darnell Washington, and even a Michael Mayer, right? Like, he is a freak athlete. I think Musgrave is going to run the best 40 of the three, but Musgrave also missed a lot of time this year. So you're talking about a really high-end athlete who's a truck to bring down, and a big part of the Utah offense. So he kind of checks a lot of different boxes. Size, he may be a little short, but 6'3", 240, no one's going to complain about that. Or maybe 235. No one's going to complain about that. None of the same. And just an absolute force to bring down, moves well given that size, good hands, and was just asked to be a huge part of that Utah offense. So the production's there as well. Versus Musgrave, who missed time. You saw it in a couple games in the Senior Bowl. Washington is more of this high-end blocker with some decent receiving upside, so it's worth taking that project in my mind. And then Michael Mayer does everything right except for the fact that he's just not a great athlete. So Kincaid, in a lot of ways, has like the perfect resume. He checks a lot of boxes that every other guy has at least one box left unchecked. For Mayer, it's the athletic, testing, and I know he's not going to be great there. For Washington, it's like, yeah, this guy wasn't really asked to be the number one, pass-catching weapon in an offense. And for Musgrave, it's like he missed so much time. Kincaid, you don't have really any of those concerns. So I could see him end up being the first time off the board. I have it be Michael Mayer. I've said this plenty of times. Mayer, to me, is a blue chipper. It's just I don't know what to do with a guy who is not a great athlete and plays tight end, right? So I still think he's a stud, and I think he's going to make an impact at the next level. Kincaid to the Packers at 15. I'd prefer Mayer, but ultimately, I don't think they're going to go pass catcher. Even if it is Jordan Love under center next year, I do think they're going to stick to their ways for the most part, and it's going to be defense or it's going to be offensive line for a guy they like. Maybe safety. Like if Brian Branch is here, I could see that being something they entertain too, just given that Amos is a free agent this year, and then you also have Savage becoming a free agent next year. And then Joey Porter Jr. to the Commanders. Yeah, this is one of my favorite fits. I love him in that Jack Del Rio defense. 6'2", long arms. I think he'll test pretty well in Indianapolis as well. And a guy who's just gotten better and better year over year at Penn State. So I want to be the team that banks on him being able to continue that growth, continue to progress in the right direction. So if I'm the Commanders right here in the middle of the first round, I'm making this pick every single time. That takes us to Pittsburgh Steelers. Another team I think would make a lot of sense there for Joey Porter Jr. Said they go Darnell Wright. Yeah, I've been a little bit more skeptical about Wright as like the tackle of choice. I'd prefer Anton Harrison, and then you flip Dan Moore to right tackle, but it could go the other way around if you have Wright ahead of Anton Harrison. Tomorrow I'm actually going to have my offensive line rankings, my updated version of both tackle and interior offensive line coming out, so be sure to come back tomorrow if you want more in-depth thoughts. But I have Anton Harrison ranked higher than Wright, so I'd go Harrison here, but you could also go Darnell Wright, plug and play at right tackle, and then move Chukwuma Okorafor over to left tackle, which actually I just noticed that he did note that he played that position in college. So I think Chukwuma Okorafor moved to right tackle because he couldn't stick at left tackle, but maybe things have changed over the course of a couple of years. So Pittsburgh's offensive line, literally from left tackle all the way through to right tackle, they could be upgraded. There's not a spot on that O-line that couldn't use a boost right now. So if they go offensive line, I will be a happy Steelers fan. Then we get to the Lions. Brian Branch, I like this fit a fair amount. So we go corner at 6, Christian Gonzalez, and add a nickel guy who could also be a strong safety type. They'd probably utilize Branch more in a safety role and pair him up with Kirby Joseph and Tracy Walker, and that becomes a really interesting trio and guys who can do so many different things, but also really solid athletes that can fly around the field. I'm here for that. But also he could be that nickel corner, and then you have Okudah and Gonzalez playing on the outside. So I like that pairing a ton. No defensive line. If you're a Lions fan, like how big of a priority is that too? Because Aiden Hutchinson, Houston from last year, Lee McNeil, even with some big games at the nose tackle spot, how big of a need in your eyes is defensive line? Could you double up in the secondary? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd be all for it. Kind of give Aaron Glenn, former DB's coach in New Orleans, give him the reinforcements, give him the guys that he can fully run his defense with. So I'd be here for it all the way. Bucs at 19 take Nolan Smith. I think this pick is totally live. I like him going to Green Bay or Tampa Bay. I'm kind of honing in on Nolan Smith going 15 or 19, which he could certainly go other places. But to me, those spots make the most sense. But a high-end athlete, and it does sound like he might do a little bit at the combine, which is exciting, at least maybe a 40, but obviously the pec injury that cut his season short, but you're getting a high-level run defender, and honestly, I should use Nolan Smith more as an example when talking about Will Anderson. But yeah, your weight doesn't necessarily always correlate to how good of a run defender you are, because that's the number one thing Nolan Smith brings to the table, and he's 6'3", like 235. So I almost wonder if like a 4-3 defense would want him to be a Sam and just be kind of an off-ball hybrid. You can blitz with him a little bit, kind of, yeah, that Sam linebacker role, but it's really only in a 4-3 defense, which, if I'm Nolan Smith, I don't want that, because that's limiting your pool of teams that run a 4-3 pretty drastically to being able to be a fit in any defense, right? Like all 32 teams want you, cool, you're more likely to go higher. If only like a third of the NFL wants you, then you're going to be waiting for a little bit. I think the same thing, plus injury concerns and the heart condition. I think the same thing kind of happened to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, where a lot of teams saw him as like a 4-3 outside linebacker, as that kind of Sam, and then he ended up falling. But also, I know the heart condition played a factor in that. Anyways, talking about Nolan Smith here. Yeah, I'd love to see this. This is your Shaq Barrett long-term replacement, but also a guy who right away, as he's working back from the pec injury, can work in as just the third guy. Maybe he gets the early down work too, because Shaq Barrett coming off the Achilles injury, no guarantee he's the same. Maybe you lean into Nolan Smith's ability to be a high-end run defender right away, get him some reps, get him out on the field, and then on third down and passing situations, Shaq Barrett comes in his spot. And maybe once he starts to pick it up, by the back half of next year, you're working in a rotation where Smith, Joe Tryon-Shank, and Barrett are all on the field at the same time. I think that's the best version of Bucs, if you were to ask me. So I'd love to see them go edge here at 19. I've gone running back, I've gone corner, I've gone edge a fair amount of times for Tampa. Then at 20, Seattle takes Jackson Smith-Njigba. I am not going to have this in my upcoming mock, little spoiler alert there, but I really wanted to. I really thought about it. I decided to go in a little bit of a different direction, but the more I think about it, the more I really like JSN being that true slot wide receiver for the Seahawks. So all my Seahawks fans, let me know what you would think about wide receiver in the first round. I know a lot of focus is on, defense and then some trench work, offensive line, but I think this is the exact slot wide receiver that you're looking for. And then plus, once Tyler Lockett, he's moved on from in Seattle, I think your 1-2 punch could be Jackson Smith-Njigba being kind of the volume guy out of the slot, kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown is for the Lions, and Cooper Kupp has done plenty for the Rams in that same type of role. And then DK Metcalf is kind of the foil to that, this guy who's unstoppable deep down the field, and then that slant off of it is killer. I think that could be your 1-2 punch long term. So I really like that fit a ton. And then at 21, the Chargers take Lucas Van Ness. Man, if he falls this far, I wouldn't hate this whatsoever. I'm thinking of him as that 3-4 DN spot. Then you get into passing situations, show your nickel, your dime, your four-man fronts like that. And it's Bosa and Mack on opposite edge. I got to bring my hand back in so you can see. There we go. Those guys on the edge, and then Van Ness and someone else there in the middle. I think he's got that potential to be that 3-4 DN, but also kick inside, line up over the guard or in between the guard and center once you get into those passing four-man fronts. So I like this fit a ton. And I also think this is great value because, honestly, I don't think Van Ness gets past 15 at Green Bay. I think Green Bay would take Van Ness over Nolan Smith, who, again, I'm kind of keen in on at 15 or 19. So, if he makes it this far through the Chargers, I totally think this could be a great fit. And finding that third pass rusher, I think that's what's going to take that defense to the next level. Also a pretty good run defender, which the Chargers could certainly use a lot of help with as well. Then we get to the Ravens at 22. Clark Phillips III. Okay, interesting. We'll see once we get to the combine. His arm length will be a big topic of conversation. And to me, that's kind of the most controversial thing about him is if his arm length is solid above 30 inches, it's okay, yeah. But if he's sub that threshold, kind of like Roger McCreary, I think he's definitely falling into that day 2 mix, just like McCreary did. So I don't think he goes this high ultimately, but he certainly could. And so we'll have to wait for the measurables. But nonetheless, he is coming off a really good season at Utah, a really good defense at the college level. So being one of the premier players on one of the best defenses in college football certainly goes a long way. And he's a playmaker. Created a lot of turnovers, also a really good tackler as well. So a guy who's just fearless and competitive and he'll just fly the ball. So love guys like that, and I can see him totally fitting in with that kind of culture and identity that the Ravens have. So don't hate it, but I'm more so looking at that as maybe as a second round option there. Then we get to the Vikings at 23. Deontay Banks. So we're getting Banks over Keely Ringo, over Cam Smith. Interesting over Emmanuel Forbes. And the same can be said here at 22 about Clark Phillips. I'd have all those other three names ahead of Clark Phillips. I have Banks ahead of Clark Phillips for that matter. But nonetheless, corner definitely an area where the Vikings get better. And then you're talking about a trio of Banks, Andrew Booth Jr., and Cam Dantzler. So that gives you a lot to work with moving forward. And if two of those three guys hit, perfect. They're your boundary corners. We'll figure out the slot as we move forward. Or you could have something more like maybe Dancer moves into the slot or something along those lines. So, it's a passing league, and the Vikings secondary last year was putrid. Now, granted, I do think they're going to have as big a step up in regards to their coordinator and how big of an impact that makes for their defense. So going from Ed Donatel to Brian Flores, to me, is the single biggest leap of any defensive coordinator change. And then the only thing close to it, and honestly, the only thing I think would surpass it, is going from Matt Patricia as an OC to Bill O'Brien in New England. So I think those are the two biggest single coordinator swaps and the biggest difference they'll make for a team. Patricia to Patricia to Bill O'Brien in New England. And then Donatel to Flores in Minnesota. I think those are the biggest leaps that we'll see at any coordinator spot. So, part of me kind of wants to wait to go corner a little bit later because I do believe in Booth Jr. and Dantzler. But nonetheless, if they make it a round one priority, I will not be upset. And it'll at least be a B grade pick here for me. Then at 24, we get to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Michael Mayer, yep, this is one I've seen plenty of times. I'm starting to come around and starting to think that, Evan Ingram is more than likely going to come back. Jordan Schultz has been putting out some reports that, they've been having some great talks. So that's a good sign. And then, at that point, if they do sign him, depending on the contract, of course, maybe tight end becomes kind of a round 3 or later type of position to address. I do think they can incorporate a lot of 2 tight end sets. Peterson did a great job making that a big part of the offense in Philadelphia, so I'd be interested by it. But nonetheless, I think in the meantime, they'll go somewhere else there in round 1 if they do land Ingram. So interior offensive line, corner, I'd love that. Brian Branch, Antonio Johnson, this nickel corner strong safety hybrid, that'd be the ideal fit to me for that defense. Then at 25, the Giants take Jordan Addison. Take Jordan Addison. This would be my favorite pick that the Giants can make. This, or if they somehow got one of the quarterbacks. This would be the best case scenario to me for the Giants. So get that clear-cut number 1 guy that could be the volume dude in your offense. And then, you kind of have other wrinkles kind of playing off of that. They bring back Richie James, things like that. I think Addison makes all their roles that much easier because Addison's going to have that number 1 wide receiver attention. But also, I'd love to see what this means and what this could do for Daniel Jones. Having a guy that is that clear-cut number 1 dude who is a legit number 1 wide receiver at the NFL level. How much better does he look? Because we're talking about Daniel Jones coming off the best year of his career. I'm open to the idea that he gets even better if he were to add a guy like Jordan Addison. So I'd love to see that be the pick at 25. Then 26, the Cowboys take Bijan Robinson. Yeah, I'm here for that. That would be fun. This would be your Zeke Elliott replacement. Been a lot of talks about a pay cut there with Zeke, and I don't know. That one can go either way. Maybe the two sides come together and they find that right number, or Zeke's gonna be like, nah. And if he does, then Dallas is probably going to cut him and save the $4.5-5 million that they can, and then long term even more savings. And if they do that, Bijan Robinson, oh my God, this just feels like a Cowboys move. Go make the big splash play, but also a guy who loves his receiving ability. So getting another receiving element of that offense, make the life of CeeDee Lamb a little bit easier. I'm totally here for that. Also make the life of Dak Prescott easier, both with a more efficient run game and a more explosive running back next to him. But additionally, another really good pass catcher that can, you can just do simple stuff with. And then if you can tag Tony Pollard, I think Bijan and Pollard is a hell of a 1-2 punch. And, if you draft Bijan, you're probably just tagging Pollard, then letting him walk. I don't know if you're going to extend him, but maybe you could. But nonetheless, that 1-2 punch, if Pollard comes back completely healthy, would be so much fun. Other areas you could go here, I still think corner should be something they look at, but off-ball linebacker, interior offensive line, maybe even edge depth. You can never have enough pass rushers. So then we move to the Bills. Cyrus Torrance, I think this is the pick that a lot of Bills fans want. And if they make it happen, then this would be a slam dunk, no doubt about it. This is basically who they thought Roger Saffold was going to be. So huge upgrade, helps the run game, helps keep Josh Allen clean. And I kind of go back to this all the time. In the divisional game, there was so much hoopla made about how bad the Bengals offensive line was going to look. The Bills offensive line was the weaker unit of those two. The Bengals offensive line held their own. So anything in the trenches, to me, for the Bills, makes a lot of sense. That and maybe safety here at 27. Then we get to the Bengals at 28. Anton Harrison, this is my boy, my OT3. Man, you make this type of selection. Jonah Williams, I don't know what you're going to do with him. Maybe flip him over to right tackle, have a little bit of competition between him and Collins. Or I think what I would do, at least to start, Harrison becomes your left tackle. Williams slots in at left guard. That way you can get Jackson Carman off the field. And then you're rolling back with, Kappa and Karras there at center and right guard. And then at right tackle, you give the job to Collins. And then if he struggles, you start to sprinkle in Jonah Williams there at right tackle, and you bring Jackson Carman back onto the field at left guard. You could maybe even explore Jackson Carman at right tackle. He's more of a run blocker than he is a high-end pass blocker. That's kind of why I thought coming out of Clemson, I was like, yeah, left tackle, he was fine there at college, but let's move this guy inside to guard. Unfortunately, he's just not all that great. So I think day one, if this were the pick, it'd be Harrison, Williams, Karras, and Kappa, then with La'el Collins at right tackle. And you can kind of assess Collins as you go along with maybe moving Williams out there or maybe even Jackson Carman. So love to see this be the pick here for Cincy. 29, the Saints take Myles Murphy, and we talk about a faller. Sheesh. I still got Myles Murphy going somewhere in the top 10 just because 6'5", 275, and that type of an athlete. those guys go early in the draft. But man, if he fell all the way to 29, this is Marcus Davenport 2.0 for New Orleans. And honestly, if he gets to like the teens, just like the Saints did with Davenport, I wouldn't be surprised if they bundled up some assets and went to make the move. And I have the Saints moving up and making a trade in my mock this upcoming weekend. So I'll leave it at that. But man, if Murphy fell into their lap, that would be an A++ there for New Orleans. Eagles at 30, Kalijah Kancey. I'd love to see Kancey. It's 6 foot, 280 pounds. Pass rush specialist. Not going to give you much in the way of being a run defender. But pair him up with Jordan Davis, this kind of one-of-one Planet Theory. Not many dudes built like that. Insane athlete as well, but high-level run defender, or at least you drafted him to be that at 13 last year. So pairing Davis up with Kancey would make for an insane interior pass rush, or an interior duo. And you're talking about a team that's going to have to move on from Javon Hargrave. Fletcher Cox can't play forever. Honestly, it's about time that Fletcher Cox probably hangs it up. So you're going to need those reinforcements as an interior pass rusher. Haven't really gotten to see Milton Williams in that role, so I'd love to see them take a swing of the bat at someone like a Kancey there at 30. I think that's good value for him too. Then Will McDonald of the Chiefs at 31. Yeah, I love this pick a ton. I think this makes a lot of sense. Get that speed rusher on the other side with Karlaftis on the other end being the more physical, wins with his hands, that sort of stuff. And then Will McDonald is the speed rusher on the other end. 6'3", 240. He wants to attack tackles outside shoulders. And the Chiefs are going to be winning a lot of games. They're going to be playing from in front. Teams are going to have to pass to overcome a deficit against Kansas City. So adding more pass rushers is never going to be a bad thing. And especially if they can work something out with Frank Clark and maybe keep him around at a more understandable cap hit, I'm interested. Because then you're talking about a trio of whoever the first rounder is. In this case, let's just say it's Will McDonald, paired up with George Karlaftis, first rounder last year, and then Frank Clark, who somehow comes alive in the playoffs, but maybe is like a DPR. He becomes that much more important to that defense. So I'm never going to be upset if Kansas City is adding to their secondary or adding their pass rush, because they're a good team and teams are going to have to pass to overcome a deficit against Kansas City. So if you can take steps to make that much harder, I'm all for it. And Will McDonald certainly makes it harder to complete a comeback against Kansas City. And as noted at the top, we do have a second round portion, so I'll kind of fly through this, make it a little bit quicker. Keely Ringer to the Steelers, that would be awesome. That'd be an A grade for me. Desperately need corners, so I'd love to see a guy who to me is still a first rounder. Fall to Pittsburgh at 32. DeJuan Jones to the Texans. I like that fit a ton. Then Titus Howard becomes a guard, maybe a right guard. AJ Cann replacement. Totally here for that. Just a mean mover people, and at 6'8", yeah, you're kind of built to do just that. Keon White to the Cardinals. I like that a ton. Could also go interior offensive line. They went corner at 9, so I like the edge there, but interior offensive line also makes a lot of sense. This tight end turn edge rusher that's kind of just now really figuring out the position. Really like what Keon White brings to the table. And then we get to Matt Bergeron to the Colts. Do they really need offensive tackle? That's kind of interesting. I feel like Bernard Ryman kind of turned it on towards the end of the year, and Braden Smith maybe coming off a disappointing season, but I don't think you cut bait after one subpar year. So I'd rather see this be edge or wide receiver, if I'm honest. And then we get to 36, the Rams taking Drew Sanders. Interesting, they cut Bobby Wagner, and Wagner, over the last 5 years of his career, has been able to add a lot of production as a blitzer. So adding a guy like Drew Sanders to fill that role is interesting. I don't think the Rams will do this, just because I think by them moving on from Bobby Wagner, they saw, hey, we haven't prioritized linebacker, and we won a Super Bowl without prioritizing linebacker. So now with holes at corner, offensive line, defensive line, edge kind of off of that, safety, I think that they're going to be like, yeah, well, we didn't prioritize linebacker because when we do that, it creates those other holes in other spots of the roster. So I think 36 is going to go edge or interior offensive line. But hey, if they could do Sanders, I'm not mad. And maybe you could use Sanders just straight up as an edge rusher. He did a lot of that at Alabama before he transferred to Arkansas. So maybe that's kind of the role that Sikkema was thinking of here. Anyways, let's move on to the Seahawks. Emmanuel Forbes, really excited to see what he looks like in Indianapolis, specifically what he weighs in at. I think that's kind of becoming the one main knock against Forbes, but 3-year starter, ton of ball production. So if his weight isn't too big of an outlier compared to previous corners, then I think he's going to be okay. Don't know if Seattle ends up going corner, but if they do it on day 2, I think that could be a nice middle ground to appease a lot of Seahawks fans, but also address an area where I think they get better. But ultimately, I do think if they're going to add corner, it's going to be somewhere in free agency, adding a veteran opposite of Tariq Woolen. Because if you go corner here somewhere in the draft, you're talking about a second-year player, 2 second-year players in Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, and then a corner. I'd like to add a little bit more experience in that secondary to balance out Bryant and Woolen as younger players. Then we get to the Raiders, Trenton Simpson. This would be an absolute slam dunk. Whether it's Simpson or Sanders, if they get the chance to take one at 38, the Raiders should jump all over it. They have been looking for a difference maker at linebacker for so long now. Too long, really. So if they get the chance to get the number 1 off-ball linebacker, in my opinion, in this draft class, at 38, you jump all over it. Then we get back to the Cardinals at 39. This came via the Carolina trade that we went through in the first round. Steve Avila, this would be awesome. So you're talking about a second round haul, let alone disregard that pick at 9. But the Cardinals in just the second round, adding edge, adding interior offensive line, and 2 guys that I think are live to go late day 1. Like, I think Keon White and Steve Avila, I've had mock for both those guys go late 1. So I think that'd be awesome value. And then you talk about adding Devon Witherspoon at 9 as well. That's an A++ type of draft, or at least start to it, in my opinion, for the Cardinals. Okay, next up, get the Saints taking Luke Musgrave. Would love to see this. I had Michael Mayer go to New Orleans my last mock. Tight end is certainly an area where they can get better, and that could be an interesting way to improve that pass catching core, that is, without having to do it at wide receiver. I do think they're going to move on from Michael Thomas, which certainly opens the door for them to go wide receiver as well, though. Then we get to Tennessee Titans taking Jalen Hyatt. Like that pick a ton. Did he skip a pick? No, 41. Okay, just make sure I saw that right. But nonetheless, Hyatt, I've had this pick a ton, just because he's that speed burner, over-the-top weapon that is perfect to add into a run-centric offense, right? Like the play action with a 4-2 guy that can get over the top and behind defenses. That's a match made in heaven. So I'd love to see that pick there. Then we get to the Browns. Next up at 42, Keanu Benton. I've done this plenty of times. This is the exact fit that the Browns are looking for on their interior defensive line. I've talked about it a ton on this channel, so I won't drone on too long here. But Benton's a great run stopper. That's exactly what the Browns need. So love that fit. B.J. Ojulari to the Jets. This could be your Carl Lawson insurance. It makes a lot of sense to move on from Lawson and save like $13 million against the cap. If they do that, B.J. Ojulari as like a DPR, third pass rush specialist, would love that. Falcons take Antonio Johnson. I like that a good bit. Richie Grant kind of gives me some similar vibes. Antonio Johnson can play the nickel, which I don't think Richie Grant ever did at UCF. But Grant wasn't necessarily the most insane tester at the combine, had a pretty good Senior Bowl, showcased a lot of instinct, and, his physicality was a big part of why people liked Grant. And Johnson at 6'3", 200. I just feel like you don't have a true over-the-top free safety there. Maybe Grant could do that, but again, with athletic limitations, I don't know if I really trust him in that role. So you could probably do some split safety work with Johnson and Grant, but yeah, I'd be interested to see who, would ultimately become that over-the-top guy, and then who would rotate down to the box. I'd be interested to see how that would play out. Then the Packers take Sidney Brown. Totally think this could happen. That safety insurance, just in case you lose Amos this offseason, or you lose Savage next offseason. Love having that plan in place. Plus, I think you do a lot of big nickel work with Sidney Brown, kind of as that third safety, and move him into the box and just let him be, a headache to opposing offenses. Like that a ton. Next, Cody Mock to the Patriots. Yeah, I could see that. I'm thinking they kind of need a tackle right now, because also, you could cut Trent Brown and save, I think, $12+ million against the cap. So not only is Isaiah Wynn going to walk in free agency, Trent Brown makes a lot of sense as a cut candidate. Maybe it's just a cut and re-sign, or even just a straight up pay cut to make the numbers work. But Cody Mock, to me, I think is best off starting at guard and then moving to tackle after a couple of years, kind of like what the Cowboys wanted to do with Tyler Smith. So I don't know if the timeline really matches with what New England needs right now. Commanders take John Michael Schmitz. They could certainly get better on the interior offensive line. I also think he comes with guard flexibility. So if Chase Roullier comes back healthy and he is as good a center as he has been in years prior, I think John Michael Schmitz could just be a left guard improvement or a right guard improvement over Trey Turner. So either way you spin it, JMS has a way to get on the field. Lions taking Monty Smith. I like that a fair amount. I feel like you already got a nose tackle, though. So if you're going to go interior defensive line, I'd go Tuli Pelotu. That's a tough name, and case in point there. But yeah, Mozzie Smith, again, nose tackle to me. I'd rather see them take a 3-4 DN if they're going to do something like that. So other defensive linemen I'd prioritize there for Detroit. Next, Pittsburgh Steelers taking Brian Brzee. Yeah, Brian Brzee falling all the way to pick 49, just barely making it in the top 50. That is crazy. I still got a round 1 grade on Brzee. He is a upside potential-based draft pick, though, so I understand that. And having him fall to the middle of the second round, I mean, that's an absolute win for a team that needs interior defensive line. For that matter, that should have been the pick for the Lions at 48, and then Mozzie Smith makes a ton of sense for the Steelers. So if you were to just flip those two picks, give the Steelers a true nose tackle that they're looking for long-term, Brian Brzee to the Lions, awesome value at 48, that would be A+ for both of them. But the other way around, it's kind of like I understand B maybe for the Lions, and then an A+ for the Steelers. So I think there's another way to just flip those guys and it becomes a win for both sides. But anyways, Tampa Bay taking Darnell Wright. Interesting. It comes down to, I guess, how they feel about Cade Otton. But Washington has a ton of really interesting fits, especially if you were to make it to the second round. This high-level blocker, but also at 6'7", 260, and someone who moves well for that size. There is interesting upside as a pass catcher. So really interested to see where he goes. And I don't rule out late round 1. So this value here is hard to pass on if you're Tampa Bay, but I don't know if this is necessarily where I'd go if I were the Bucs. 51, Dolphins take Tariq Stevenson. Love to see this type of man press ability added into that defense. Byron Jones is going to be interesting. I would assume a post June 1 cut casualty. I think that would save like north of $13 million against the cap. So I think that's ultimately what the Dolphins do end up doing. He would be a great fit in that Vic Fangio defense. That was if to keep him. Not mad about it. But adding a corner here nonetheless makes a lot of sense. Try to find that future boundary corner. And Stevenson looked great at the Senior Bowl. And I think it's really good value there at 51. Seattle next up at 52. Take Adetomiwa Adebawore, 6'2", 280, but he's got long arms, so he could work as an interior guy, but I think interior, but also flexibility to move out to edge makes a lot of sense for Adebawore. So kind of that, we added Will Anderson earlier for the Seattle Seahawks, so adding another guy with a little bit more weight, but kind of gives you that versatility across the defensive line, I think makes a lot of sense. Again, a lot of trench work focus for Seattle this offseason. Then at 53, the Bears going to take Joe Tippmann. Man, I've had Tippmann go, in the third round of, I think, the last couple of mocks, maybe late 2. But I got a lot of pushback. Both teams that I gave Tippmann to, they were like, he's not that good. And I'm like, I don't know, man. He's got good tape, and he's like 6'6", and apparently his 3-cone is about to be insane. So I bet this is a guy that post-combine, a lot of people are like, yeah, Joe Tippmann worked. I like that pick. I like that a lot. So we'll have to wait and see, but I think he's going to turn some heads at Indianapolis. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense, and I'd be excited about it if I'm a Bears fan. That type of movement skills in a zone blocking scheme, sign me up for it. Then at 54, the Chargers taking Tucker Kraft. Yeah, he's an interesting tight end prospect. So Kraft ahead of Laporta. That's interesting. I got Laporta ranked ahead of him, but Kraft just looks like a guy who's playing at South Dakota State and a guy who's just playing against, below average competition. That's interesting. They say San Diego State. That's not where he goes to school. But anyways, if you don't think that it's just, the level of competition that makes Kraft look like Superman, then this becomes a really good value. But if it is the competition, maybe it takes a little bit of time, which for tight ends, it tends to take a year or two anyway. So wouldn't hate this pick. And plus, it's kind of a spot where I think they can get better long-term. Gerald Everett getting close to 30. I think turns 30 next season. So could see them look long-term, find that replacement. Then the Lions at 55. Cedric Tillman, interesting. I am so excited to see what Lions, what wide receiver they're looking at. Because they're going to need a DJ Chark replacement. Maybe they bring him back. And if they do, okay, I'll probably turn my attention elsewhere. But I'd love to see them get that big body type like a Chris Tillman or Cedric Tillman and have him be the possession guy. Then Jameson Williams is your over-the-top burner, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown is your volume dude out of the slot. I love the way that works out on paper. So whether it's Rashee Rice, maybe you'd probably get Rashee Rice a little later, but Tillman here at 55 or later, I think you can get a little bit later. But I'm interested to see what his combine looks like and see if he's got a little bit more movement skills. I'm really keen in on that 3-cone for Tillman. That'll tell me if he could be more of a impact intermediate route runner. Next up, the Jags at 56, Cam Smith. I mean, I'm surprised Cam Smith didn't go in the first round somewhere in this mock. So to get him here at 56 would be unbelievable value for the Jags. And if you're a Jacksonville fan, I'd be very stoked if it were to play out like that. Jack Campbell going to the Giants. I think there's other linebackers that kind of fit what Wink Martindale wants. But nonetheless, middle of second round, late second round, I think makes a lot of sense. If his 40 is better than what we're kind of anticipating, this guy's going to shoot up the boards. If he runs a better than expected 40, I wouldn't doubt that people start putting him up in that, top off-ball linebacker type of conversation. So we'll see once we get those athletic numbers, kind of finalized and wants to become official. But I think there's better fits for the Giants, but nonetheless, linebackers a need, so I wouldn't hate it. Garrett Williams to the Cowboys. A guy who got hurt during the season, so we didn't get to see the full breakout potential. But I do think Dallas can get better on the outside. It comes down to how much buy-in you have on Deron Bland, 5th-round pick. So can he get better? He's a young guy. Yes, I think there's more potential to tap into. But at the same time, why not go ahead and add one more guy just to be sure? Because Dallas is going to be a good team next year. So as opposed to being like, okay, well, we have a problem at number 2 corner. How do we fix it? Okay, we'll do it next offseason. I'd rather go ahead and have that answer on the roster. So I'd love to see them go corner somewhere there in the top 100. Next up, we get the Bills taking Jahmyr Gibbs. I think this makes a lot of sense. A lot of running back picks, but my problem with this is, one, James Coker looked really good down the stretch last year, so I think he looked good enough. Let's go ahead and use this on. You already went into your offensive line. Can we add someone to the secondary? Can we add defensive line talent? Because once Von Miller got hurt, nobody could make a big impact and take a game over. So, trenches or secondary would be my priority here, because Jahmyr Gibbs is just like, if you were to take Dalvin Cook in his prime and call that like the A grade of Dalvin Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs to me is like the B plus version of that, and James Cook was like the B minus to B version of that same thing. So it feels like you're drafting the same player in the second round 2 years in a row. So if you're going to go running back, give me Zach Charbonnet. Give me someone completely different or something like that. Tank Bigsby, Sean Tucker, something like that. I'd be more interested in. Or if you really want running back, like pay the premium in the first round, go move up and get Bijan Robinson. Not a lot of Bills fans are going to like that. Brandon Beane, I doubt, would make that move. And Brandon Beane is my favorite GM in football right now, so don't think he'd make that move, but I just don't like the idea of doubling up Gibbs with Cook because it feels like the same guy. Anyway, Sam Laporta then to the Bengals. I think they could use a tight end long term. I think they're going to need to find a way to replace Tyler Boyd. He does feel like the odd man out of that wide receiver room in another offseason's time. So whether it's Trent Irwin and whoever this tight end ends up being, I think they can work the intermediate and that slot role enough to kind of fill in the production you lose with Tyler Boyd. So I do like seeing them go tight end, and I do think you can wait beyond round 1 to get a good one because this is a good tight end class. Last couple of picks, Panthers at 61, take Felix and Ozama. Gives you 2 kind of lighter edge rushers with Brian Burns and FAU, but nonetheless 2 awesome speed rushers, and they've been looking to find that other edge rusher opposite of Brian Burns to kind of take the load off of his back. So I'd love to see them prioritize this here in the second round. So love this value. Felix and Ozama, I think he'd go earlier. I've had him go later. I don't know. He's kind of a tough one. The edge class entirely is tricky. So I'd love to see this pick here from Carolina. Eagles at 62, Josh Downs. This feels like just an upgrade over Quez Watkins straight up. At least a guy you can do more with. Quez Watkins kind of feels like one note. He's going to work down the field, and that's his game. Josh Downs can work the underneath stuff. He's great as a satellite player. That's his number one strength, is being a yak weapon. But I also think once you get him working deeper down the field, it may not be, routes with hard cuts like your digs and your posts and things like that, but running crosser routes, this dude is hard to keep up with, so he will outrun defenders. So get him on those deep crossers, and he can make an impact there too. So I'd love to see that type of addition to Philadelphia offense. Last pick we'll talk about, Devon A-Chain to the Chiefs. Man, like this team needed any more speed. But I'd be interested. And this could be your kind of moving on from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Jerick McKinnon's getting a little old. Pair Isaiah Pacheco and his violent running style with the speed of Devon A-Chain, who's running like a 10-1 100-meter dash at Texas A&M on their indoor and outdoor track and field team. That is an interesting 1-2 punch. But all in all, really solid mock draft from Trevor Sikkema. Sure, there's things I didn't necessarily agree with, but always going 2 rounds makes it more fun. I'll give Sikkema... Let's go with an 85. I'll give him a solid 85 here. I felt like this was a good mock draft. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What would you grade it, whether it's a number grade or letter grade? Love to hear your thoughts. And of course, tell me your favorite squad is and if you would be excited about the haul that Sikkema gave your favorite team. Love to hear your opinions down below in the comment section. Like if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe if you're new and want more mock draft content. But until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.